Hey, what's up, everybody? BDF44 coming at you with another video. All right, so I want to talk about the Zen Master, Phil Jackson, showing up at the Laker game yesterday. You know, a lot of what we've talked about in regards to the Lakers have been about, revamping the front office and putting us in a position to kind of see some new faces up there moving around and making decisions for us, since we had such poor decision making plague this season. It's important that we just start to see some signs of change, and I think Phil Jackson's presence at this crypto.com arena yesterday was a sign of hope for us Laker fans. Maybe not necessarily a sign of him coming back to this organization, but definitely something that we can hang our hats on in terms of saying, see, Jeannie called Phil. Now we got an opportunity to see Phil come back. I think the problem with the Phil Jackson rumor is what we last saw Phil doing, which was having a tough go around with the Knicks and all that was said about his tenure there. Now that whole situation I watched from afar, and it just, listening to people like Stephen A. Smith and Knicks fans, they weren't very happy with him. I'm not gonna sit up here and pretend like I don't remember that. That's about as much of it as I'm certain of. What else happened was just hearsay and narratives and all that good stuff. But what I can say is they weren't happy. And so that left me uncertain if I want to bring him in to be a president here. Just not certain I'm ready to be in an iffy spot as it pertains to the rebuild. Now, I know his appreciation for the Lakers is going to be a different vibe because he won championships with us recently, although he did win one with the Knicks as a player. His history with us is different. Obviously, his relationship with Jeannie in the past would make it so that he'll have probably a more personal time here, just in general, than he probably would have had in New York. Just me talking from my little point of view, it looked like to me that the New York Knicks represented him having to kind of not be a part of what he and Jeannie had going on a personal side of the game. It seemed like that was a conflict of interest, and it split them apart. That's what it looked like to me. Now, I'm not saying I heard any reports whatsoever about that. I was just looking at the situation from afar and putting two and two together as my brain often does. And there's a lot of different variables that could lead to what it is that I thought I was seeing. But what it looked like I was seeing is once he got to New York, he realized that it wasn't worth it. Maybe, that's the story I tell myself in my head. And why he was so despondent in New York is because it represented, that situation not being feasible anymore. Being that it would be considered a conflict of interest and all of that good stuff with the NBA and all that. So I just felt like that. I always felt like that. When I was listening to New York fans talk about how he wasn't involved and how he was despondent, I was like, yeah, well, it did cost him his girl. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's honestly how I looked at that New York Knicks situation. So I could be wrong, but that's just what I got from it. At any rate, him being back in the building gave us a lot of hope. Some people want him to come back and coach. I don't think that'd be a good idea for his health. I don't want him to coach this team at all. I know that the traveling situation was a thing about 6 years ago when we were talking about having him be a coach again. He couldn't go on the road or something like that. It was a lot for him to try to deal with that hip. Now, I know he's several years removed from that surgery, but at the same time, it's probably best for him not to be on planes as much as would be required for him to coach. It would be probably for his best interest, it would be a Kyrie situation where he would only coach home games rather than road in that situation. So I'm not looking at him to be a coach, but if Jeannie's calling him in for assistance, that's not something that should surprise anybody, because history tells us she's going to call on people that she trusts on a personal level to help with business stuff. And, that hasn't always worked out. But, when you have the type of resources that Jeannie has, close relationships with Magic Johnson, they had Phil Jackson, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. It's not like I'm calling on my homie Ted or something like that. No, that's not what we doing here. She has obviously goats in her back pocket that she can call up and get advice from at any moment. I don't think that should be something we shun at all when you have that type of phone Rolodex. So, all in all, I just think great thoughts about Phil Jackson in general. Obviously, is a legendary coach for us, brought us plenty of championships, had us maneuvering through some treacherous waters during his era, and got us victories in abundance. So I couldn't be more pleased with having him in the building in general. And if he wanted to be a part of the organization, I would definitely listen, to what he has to say. I think, that whole situation in New York would kind of leave some people with a bad taste in the mouth. But at the same time, you got to think about what happened beyond that. And needless to say, 11 championship rings plus one as a player, that's not a resume that you that you look at sideways at all. That's the GOAT right there. So it's very important that we just take advantage of the fact that he could at least be there for us. And it spoke as well. His presence spoke to just the importance of not only that game with Steph and LeBron in the building, the importance of the Lakers and their struggles right now and how much has been said about management. I don't think his presence is a coincidence by any stretch of the imagination. And, it probably does speak to Jeannie making some phone calls and saying, see, show up, to apply a little bit of pressure on people. Pressure needs to be applied. I think the situation Jeannie finds herself in is a tricky one because even though she's the owner of the team, it's one of those situations where you when you have the golden arc, you're expected to handle it a certain way. You're expected to guard it with your life, so to speak. And when I say the golden arc, obviously I mean LeBron James. When you have the prized possession of the entire league and you're struggling with it, people look at you sideways. They don't just look at you and say, oh, she has what it is that I want. They also say, look at what she's doing, what it is that we all want. It becomes a pressured situation, even for owner, to kind of let LeBron be LeBron. Because the leverage that Bron has is any other franchise owner probably will allow him to do that. Unfortunately, us allowing him to do that has kind of caused us a bunch of headaches to go along with the championship. And she's still being looked at in a way to kind of let him have his way. It's almost like it's the wrong move. You listen to people telling us as Laker Nation, like, people like Shaq saying we can't win without him and don't trade him. Like, are y'all taking into the consideration the headaches that have come with having him on this particular roster these last couple of years? I mean, it has not exactly been just a parade and cakewalk for ownership. I mean, she's had to fork out a lot of money. Some mistakes have been made. And the situation looks grim in terms of the future and what it looks like for our franchise in the short term, 5, 6, 7 year span. I say short term because I think out that far, but it's like, over the next several years, we look bad looking at how things are going. We look like we're only going to be able to do limited amounts of things without blowing this entire thing up sooner than later. So she's in a tricky spot. It's looked at as irresponsible to move on from LeBron James. It's looked at as you not doing your part by not allowing him to continue to make his moves and all of that. And I just, as a person who's watching from the outside in, I wouldn't necessarily want to continue going down this path with the results that I've had. I would want to move on from that or find a way to manage it differently so that I could have a bit more control over what happens with the franchise and the roster. When you're the owner, it's like, this is my property at the end of the day. And, if I'm unhappy with it, it shouldn't be no questions about what changes can be made or whether or not I can move on from my partnership or what have you. And I just feel like Jeannie's in a weird spot. So, yeah, Phil Jackson's presence, to me, can seem to provide some bit of pressure or that she could use in her back pocket to apply to others. That's to say that, yes, you ain't the only person that can come in and make decisions. You're not the only GOAT I can call and revamp this thing. There will be life after LeBron James. We can manage this LeBron James situation differently, and if we move forward with him. And I think that that's what this all is about. Magic emerging, Cap emerging. All these folks are showing up to Crypto.com arena, and they know that we're struggling. They know that Genie's under a lot of, I don't know if the word is pressure, but I'd imagine it would be something like pressure. Under a lot of, it's a lot to deal with. And, it's time to make some changes. I think we all agree it's time to make changes. So hopefully this represents that. Now, going forward, do I expect to see more Phil Jackson sightings? I don't know. That was an ABC game. Like I said, we were going up against the Golden State Warriors. It was a huge game. It wasn't like just a random game on a Tuesday night. I wouldn't expect to see him very often. I wouldn't. But the rumors will fly. Talks of him coaching this team next year will fly. And if he's up for it, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes the job. I'm not going to sit up here and pretend with you guys. I think he's probably always had a desire to coach LeBron James. Maybe not an older LeBron James, but, when you have a chance to coach that type of player, and he's coached Kobe, he's coached Mike, I think it's a good chance he probably thought of coaching Bron too. But the thing he's going to run into with Bron is the same thing we've run into. He's an amazingly gifted athlete, player, and all of that. The thing about Bron is, once you get him, you realize it's a lot that comes with that. And for a guy like Phil Jackson, I don't know if he'd want to deal with all that comes with Bron at this stage in his life, with the health problems that he's had in his past. I wouldn't want to take on the type of responsibility of coaching a guy like that, because Phil Jackson's used to killers, man. Phil Jackson is used to killers. Every team that he's had has been led by a ferocious competitor that doesn't waver in confidence. That is not who LeBron James is. And I feel like this would be an acquired taste for a guy like Phil Jackson to coach a guy like Bron, who's a bit more kind, a bit more relaxed as it pertains to his intensity competitively. His winning mentality is a different type of winning, and it doesn't demand winning all the time. And it's unfortunate I have to say that, but that's not necessarily a knock on Bron. That speaks to the special, unique trait of those two legendary athletes in Kobe and, of course, MJ. So I just don't know if you're looking at it like, okay, I've coached MJ, I coached Kobe, let me get in here and see if I can coach Bron. Bron is different, bro. He's not those two. He's not like that. And I think Phil Jackson would get rather annoyed if history has told me anything about Phil Jackson, just watching him from afar, he would get rather annoyed with my guy Bron. I'm not gonna lie to you, because that's not his cup of tea. It's not. But I think at the end of the day, he would love to coach a player that great, because he would be able to do so many different things with that player that he wouldn't be able to do with those other two guys. Bron has different types of skill sets that would allow his triangle offense to be a different type of thing. That triangle offense is usually meant, in my opinion, for guys who teams that don't have a facilitator on the floor, traditional point guard passers, and don't have that facilitating anywhere else. That's it's like the anti issue for ball movement. You know what I mean? If you have ball movement issues, that's what it does. It fixes that. A team like New York needs to run that. A team like the Clippers, when they don't have Reggie passing the ball and doing things that way, they should run that. This Laker team possibly should try some triangle principles at times, but I think the bottom line was I think it would be very, very intriguing to see LeBron in a full-time triangle offensive situation. And I don't think it would take longer than 5 minutes for him to master the triangle if he hasn't already mastered it. So just from a schematic standpoint, from a structuring standpoint, I would really love to see what Bron looks like in triangle, depending on the team he's playing with. So, yeah, man, that's what I got to say, man. That's what I got to say. Phil Jackson showed up to Staples, or rather crypto, yesterday and raised questions, man. Just raised questions. Honestly, I just think he was showing up to a basketball game, but who knows? There's probably more to it than that. So that's what I got to say, man. BDF 44, I thank y'all for tuning in with me. Have a great day, night, or whatever time you're watching this, and I'm out.